Hello, everybody, and welcome back for another episode of Indie Impressions. My name is Nick, and today we're going to be checking out something called Where Is My Hammer by developer Toko Games. This is a game from the Indies vs. PewDiePie Jam, which I wasn't necessarily going to cover anything from. I decided to anyway, though, because it's actually a pretty fun premise, and, well, it's not so much of a game as it is just a little fun physics-enabled toy box where we get a hammer, and we can basically destroy absolutely every bit of this house with like one or two exceptions, actually maybe three or four exceptions, but still it's a vastly destructible physics system that we can mess around with here in this Unreal Engine 4 situation. So why don't I just start breaking stuff and we can get right into it. Well, actually, you know what, I should go in here first. I believe there's actually a little tutorial thing. I can't actually open any doors though, but luckily our hammer is going to let us get in here. The reason that I thought that was kind of funny is because, well, you need to know the tutorial stuff to be able to get to the place where you learn the tutorial stuff, which seems a little funny to me. So we can do left mouse to slam, middle mouse to switch, right mouse to charge, and all that really means is like left mouse is hit, middle mouse changes from left to right to up to down, and right mouse, brings it back and gives us this red exciting looking slam animation looking colorful thing. So we're just gonna go through and smash this house, and that's really all there is to it. I just think it's real fun to see what people can do with physics systems, and this is sort of like the best, most enjoyable type of thing that I always like to look for in terms of, what can an engine do? How can the physics destruction stuff be modeled? And we've often been going back to this whole geomod technology thing from, what was that, like early 2000s, when the original Red Faction was a thing. And it's come a little way in, the way that destructibility has been handled by a few other games, but largely there hasn't been a lot of huge developments in the scene. I mean, Euphoria's been a bit of a thing, and there's been some newer iterations of the Red Faction game as well, which have a somewhat developed or more developed physics engine. But, this is kind of a nice step as well. I can't really tell to what extent that these models are pre-baked to fall apart, and that's probably good. That's actually very good. Maybe it's the case that these are all going to break apart the same way every time you hit them, but they're granular to an extent that I don't really care. It feels like it gets the job done as it is, and I should be a little bit aware that if I break too many of these things up, there's a pretty good chance that this will crash. I did have that happen once before. Played about 5 minutes or so of this just to really, to jump into it, see if there's anything more to the premise than just smashing stuff, and as it turns out, not so much the case. But, it doesn't really matter. We're here to have fun, right? So you might be wondering, earlier on I said I wasn't necessarily too sure that I was going to cover anything from this game jam specifically. In case you're not familiar with this premise, the Indies vs. PewDiePie game jam is something sponsored through Game Jolt by PewDiePie himself. And basically he set out the challenge that, game developers can come in and create a game of their choosing that's both fun to play and fun to watch. So essentially it's like a YouTube Let's Player-centric game jam, which, I don't really have any issue with or anything, and I definitely don't have any issues with PewDiePie himself or anything, so please don't let this comment section become anything negative like that. Reason that I thought this was maybe a slightly questionable game jam decision, and pardon me for speaking rather candidly here, I know this is not so much the domain of this series, but in this case I thought it, wouldn't hurt too much, since what else are we doing but breaking apart this house? But, I felt like it wouldn't really be the brightest idea, just because I think a lot of people don't necessarily have the foresight to realize that, it doesn't just mean make a game about PewDiePie. And, I hope this isn't super controversial to say, but I have noticed on Game Jolt for the last few, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months or so, there's been quite a lot of sort of like PewDiePie fan games, Markiplier fan games, Jacksepticeye fan games, or Septiceye fan games. And, those are fine. I mean, anybody can choose to upload whatever they want. I just don't feel like any of those are really going to, well, many of those are going to come out as anything that particularly elevates anything. It's mostly just like, here, we found a picture of this dude, and we're going to make a game around that. And, that's, I guess it's whatever, but I just felt like encouraging a game jam of that seemed very likely to just result in many, many more of those. Thankfully, at least I found this one. I haven't looked particularly hard through the entrance yet, so I don't mean this to be negative or discouraging or anything. There very well could be a lot of very cool entries here, and I'm going to check with a finer grain tooth comb, I guess is the way to say it, before I completely dismiss them or anything. It's just, it was maybe a bit of a bias that I had going into things. Let's see if we can walk around this way. The bottom planes here that I'm trying to walk across seem to break a little bit. They don't always seem to hold their physical mass, and in this case, okay, maybe that's why. I'm trying to find one spot that I can step on at least to try and get up here. There is more to see in this house. It's actually fairly elaborate, and I think this is sort of a bit of a kiss of death when you're dealing with any kind of physics system that's quite this granular. You're going to run into what do you do with all of these polygonal things that have broken apart after they've all gotten a chance to sit around for a while, and especially when you've got a scenario where there's actually mass being held up by other mass. You know, what do you do when maybe these supports start to become a little bit more going on than the engine can actually continue to support and hold on to memory-wise? And it would be really wrong, obviously, to just start deleting all the carnage that you've already broken apart because, well, that's kind of the fun of the whole thing, right? You want to be able to see all the stuff you've smashed and see all the bits and pieces that are left over. But, you know, that's a bit of a huge memory problem after a while of doing this because the more times I break these apart, you can see the more edges and the more parts to the polygons that need to be drawn every time. And, yeah, I don't know how you necessarily get around that and still have an enjoyable physics experience. I think most likely the answer is that you don't, and you just wait for a time when the player has enough RAM for this not to be an issue anymore. Look at that freaking sweet glass. I mean, it didn't exactly break apart the way most glass does, but it still looks pretty cool anyway. Also, these statues, I believe, can be, yep, really wrecked quite well there. I am actually still running at a smooth 30 FPS. I did tone it down for this recording because I had a feeling eventually I would knock enough chunks out of things, but I haven't seen any frame dips yet, and I'm pretty certain if I was running this at 60, it would still be smooth, because when I was playing it before I started the recording, it actually stayed smooth up until the moment it crashed, so, you know, whatever the issue was, I don't think it resulted from the game breaking because there was too much on screen, and then it just couldn't render anymore. If it broke, it was just because there was some sort of weird exception or a fault of some kind. Also, I think you can just break through all the floors here, too, and yep, you could just fall out into the ether, which does kind of like launches you up to the top of the roof again, which, you know, I guess that's fine. Oh yeah, the table even breaks apart. I don't know what it is. Something about these physics-enabled games just intrinsically fun to me. I could do this for hours. I like to see things that have structures. You just slowly break them apart down to nothing and just keep going and going and going. Even better when there's actually like a physics support system that you knock away a girder and, you know, a big chunk of the building will fall down. That's like my favorite thing to mess around with in these types of things, and I hope we get to a point, some point in my lifetime, where this level of destructibility becomes uniformly accepted in most games, although I understand also for the sake of level design, that is an absolute nightmare, and I don't know how you always design around that other than making parts of the level that aren't able to be destroyed. And I think that's kind of a shame, too. Like, if you're going to go in for it, you should go all the way in if possible. But I guess there does have to be a limit on certain things. Do those little bits and pieces stay forever, too? No, it looks like those fell through the floor, perhaps, which is probably for the best, because they're awfully small and unnecessary to really be rendered. Maybe if we can ever get to the point where we can, you know, render individual bits of soil, and please, you don't need to link me to that video, I've seen it. We could actually get to the point where you could, like, break apart the shards of a piece of glass, and then the pieces of glass could actually stick around in the landscape forever. I imagine that would be absolute nightmare, though. Imagine, like, the reflections on top of it are also splintering and refracting off of each other, and then if there's any dynamic light sources, what are you asking of your graphics card at that point? It's a little bit absurd, isn't it? Well, that's what we're in for, right? Eventually, things are all going to be completely absurd with regard to what can be done with graphics engines, and I can't wait for that to happen. Imagine you're playing, like, a Quake-style deathmatch in this building, shooting at each other with rocket launchers. Oh, I'm not sure what propelled me there. But every time you hit something with your rocket launcher, like, a big chunk of the building will break apart into little bits that then will stick around and actually, you know, change the way the geometry of the level looks, or the way that, you know, the course of how you can play or anything like that. That's my dream. I want to see that happen so badly. I cannot wait for that kind of thing. And also get, you know, the Oculus involved too. I'm imagining you end up in a building like this with your VR headset on, and you can actually go through and, you know, pick up and move things. And I'm kind of hoping for something like Shenmue eventually, where we can actually, you know, have our own house and then go out into some RPG landscape and meet NPCs and, you know, visit with people and make connections and, you know, come back to your house to rest when you want. I mean, stuff that we've seen done in about 100,000 open world games at this point. But with that really personal touch that's like a little bit more believable and doesn't have to go so far out of the realm of reality. You know, Shenmue was kind of neat because it wasn't a game about, like, mass murdering people with guns. It wasn't really a game about, you know, high fantasy or magical powers. It was, like, a game about a dude that had some very above average martial arts skills and needed to avenge his family's honor because of a series of events that he had no control over. You know, it's a little bit less believable than normal life, but it's not that far off, and I could imagine a realm of the world where, you know, that's actually a thing that could happen to somebody, like, actually for real. But, you know, not that every game has to be for real. A lot of it's about escapism, right? Oh, okay, that car didn't have a very good time there. By ground. But yeah, I understand games are very much about escapism, and that's totally cool as well. I think there's a little bit of something for everybody out there, but I can definitely get into games that are like an augmented, altered reality. I think that's a lot of fun, to let yourself imagine, like, what if my life was like this person who's really good at martial arts, and what if I could meet these people, and how would I react if I had this decision to make? You know, it's just, you know, a little bit different than something you might ever run into in your actual life, but not so different that it seems impossible to imagine yourself in that person's shoes. And, you know, having a setting with this granular level of destructibility or control over your surroundings, that's a big part of immersion to me to some degree. Well, I mean, it depends on what you're after for the game, and in the case of Shenmue specifically, and I have no idea how I ended up getting into talking about just Shenmue for this long, but it really had a very cool, like, intricate blend of story to go with some pretty fun gameplay as well, and an actually pretty interesting and immersive environment on top of it. So I think that's partially why everybody was so up in arms about seeing sequels to that game, and unfortunately I don't think the actual sequel that did get made quite lived up to what the original promise was. I think we were all in a stage at the time of, you know, waiting for something that would revolutionize what technology let us do at the time, and Dreamcast seemed like, you know, the newest realm of the undiscovered, you know, what's possible out in the term of console, or the world of console gaming. We didn't really know at the time what could do, and in that case, it actually was quite surprising and ambitious, and we, I guess, all had, you know, sky's the limit was the way that I think a lot of people regarded things, and, you know, it delivered on more than we would have expected. Anyway, what a strange topic to end up on. Smashing stuff in 3D. Let's talk about Shenmue and PewDiePie games. Weird. It's a bit of an unorthodox Indie Impressions episode. Anyway, I guess I'm sort of using this game as a bit of background visual to just sort of arbitrarily rant about whatever comes to mind, which is probably okay too, I would hope. I guess the moral of the story is, I really like this idea, and I would love to see it adapted to more things. If this is something that's capable to be done by more games that use Unreal Engine 4, I am absolutely hyped to see where we could get this going with even more types of gameplay, not just a game where literally the only thing you can do is hit stuff with a hammer, although that's not bad either. Give this some actual, you know, background formative gameplay, and then let us loose into a physics-enabled realm, and, well, I guess, again, we'd have to see how we can balance that with graphics and things like that, but for what it is right now, this graphical style, the kind of cartoony atmosphere, as well as this granular level of detail works really well. So anyway, if you want to go check out Where Is My Hammer, I highly recommend you do so. You can give it a download. It's a sort of big file. It's 370 megabytes. Certainly not as big as some things I've covered, but definitely not a tiny file either. And that's actually available right on GameJolt. There will be a link, of course, so you can give that a download right in the description. I'd love to hear your opinions on any of the stuff we discussed in this episode, as well as what you think about this game itself, or the idea of this game jam, as long as we keep things classy and positive in the comments. Again, I don't want to have any kind of negativity going on, especially towards other YouTube content creators. That is absolutely not my will at all. Hopefully you understood the nuance that I was trying to convey in what I was talking about when I was expressing a little bit of distaste towards the idea, and, you know, I very well may have been proven wrong here, because this is perfectly fun and enjoyable, and I think the idea itself is not flawed. I think it's mostly the idea that people might not grab the right idea from what was even expressed in the first place, so that might just be a thing that's lost in translation. Anyway, yeah, leave me a comment, let me know if you enjoyed this episode. As always, there will be a new episode going up every single day, and if you did enjoy this episode, consider leaving a like on it, because it does help me out substantially, and I will see you back for another one tomorrow. So I hope you enjoyed it, I hope you have a fantastic night, and I will talk to you all tomorrow. Later.